Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning into our webinar. I'm really excited to introduce our topic today, getting media responses. And when thinking about what topic we should cover, it really boiled down to figuring out what insights we have to share that will dramatically affect one of the most important KPIs any publicist has, and that's the response rate from writers. And you're probably wondering how we know what we do and if it's even accurate, which is a totally valid thought when considering if this webinar is even worth your time. And that's why we want to introduce ourselves and share how we got this data. So I'm going to pass it off to Jared.
Thanks, Kate. I'm Jared. I'm the founding partner and COO of OnePitch. And aside from running operations, I also lead our sales and support team. And I'm actively communicating with PR and media professionals on a daily and a weekly basis. I initially began my career in digital marketing, running social media accounts, and later transitioned to operations and customer service. And I've always really had a knack for helping people. And I think this is by far one of the most rewarding parts about my job here at OnePitch.
Hey everybody, I'm Cassie and I'm the brand and community manager here at OnePitch, where I joined as the first employee to work alongside Jared. I currently run our social media, PR, content, and email marketing efforts. My background is in marketing, and within the past year, I've been drawn into the world of PR and media relations specifically. The best thing about working with a startup like OnePitch is the ever-changing dynamic of startup life and being able to help really build something that's based on customer feedback.
And I'm Kate LaBelle, the Director of PR here at Power Digital Marketing, and we are a full-service digital marketing agency in Old Town, and I am working with the media every day, really learning about what they like and what they don't like, and introducing new ideas to really see what bites. So my background is really in health and wellness PR, and when moving to Power Digital, I began refocusing on digital PR in particular and became obsessed with measurement. Whether it's the value of the actual placements or the efficacy of my outreach, I really want to tackle it all, and I'm excited to share with you today a bit about what I've learned in the past 6 years in the industry. So before we dive in, we do have a few questions for you to ask yourself.
First off, how many pitches have you sent that went unanswered?
How well do you know your target desired media contacts?
How well do you know your client's expectations?
How many times do you follow up on your pitch?
Are you using any tools to make your job easier, more productive, or more effective?
Do you leverage social media to connect one-to-one with media contacts?
So I'm going to dive into the why behind this topic. In 2016, it was reported that journalists were outnumbered by publicists 5-1. And as of this past week, that number actually increased to be 6-1, according to Muckrack. This means that while journalists still have to rely on the credible sources provided by publicists, they also receive more email pitches than they can handle. Journalists have also expressed that in addition to an influx of pitches, the majority they receive are irrelevant to their interests, which causes frustration and ultimately tension between two professions that are supposed to rely so heavily on one another. In addition to those 2 points, we also wanted to bring attention to this topic because the duties that are being expected of marketers are overlapping with the PR industry, and both are continuously evolving to be able to keep up with the digital world. I'm going to go ahead and transition it now over to Jared, who's going to talk about some of the pain points that journalists are dealing with.
All right. So as we've already heard and maybe have seen from those slides, journalists are dealing with a lot when it comes to their daily life. They have deadlines, they have edits to make, they have editors to respond to, and they have a constant bombardment of irrelevant and misaligned pitches flooding their inbox. I'm sure you can imagine how difficult their job must be. But do you ever wonder why they don't respond to your email? And I'm sure you probably ask, if they do respond, how come it's very short? Chances are they're dealing with a lot, as we mentioned, and a few more pain points that we're going to cover in just a moment here. So for starters, reporters, journalists, and editors are constantly looking for the expert sources and brands to quote or weigh in on their stories. You'd think hearing the ratio that Cassie mentioned would provide an easy outlet for these guys and girls. Unfortunately, though, there's just simply too much volume to keep up with, too many irrelevant messages that they have to weed through, and the whole idea of fake news has since added this new layer of complexity to the equation. According to Cision, 75% of journalists say content accuracy is most important for their organization, which requires extra vetting on their end, extra research, and ultimately to make sure that the source is 100% accurate and reliable. The second pain point that journalists are constantly dealing with is the lack of quality and relevant pitches. Sending a generic pitch typically means you're not going to hear back from that media professional and can actually even land you on their blocked list. Through my personal conversations with reporters and editors from Digital Trends, Wall Street Journal, and USA Today, all have consistently mentioned that only about 1% to 2% of the pitches they receive are relevant and catered to their beat or outlet's audience. This leads me into my third point, which is more about the actual inbox of these professionals. On average, about 100 or more emails per day that a journalist receives tend to be irrelevant to their beat or outlet, and only a handful are actually relevant. During a survey that we launched prior to the launch of our service, we found that 99% of the emails that were received in a journalist's inbox were deleted, and that only 1 to 2 of those emails were relevant to their beat or the audience. Sometimes journalists will simply delete their entire inbox because they have no time to read through the mass amount of emails, or simply because they don't want to bother with what is already in there. Remember, if you've done your due diligence, you still might miss that opportunity to connect. And now that I've shed light on some of those pain points, I want to cover some of the solutions that journalists and some that publicists can implement to help them do their job better and make it easier. For starters, journalists and reporters are regularly looking for sources and brands to feature in their stories. Many top-tier publications like the New York Times, Bloomberg, or TechCrunch do have dedicated reporters working on Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Tesla, etc. But these guys don't necessarily have as much need for brands or sources. However, there are a ton of others who do. Journalists and reporters who are on the startup beat, who are writing about funding or mergers and acquisitions, and even consumer tech products tend to have more of a need for these sources and new brands within their stories. At OnePitch, we've actually developed a really unique categorization and matching system that provides journalists with these sources and the stories they need to do their jobs easier. We're also launching a new feature in early November, which will provide reporters and journalists with a ton of resources at their disposal that they've never had access to prior.
Secondary to that, we're going to talk a little bit about social media. Earlier, we mentioned that a lack of understanding from publicists about a journalist's interests causes a lot of frustration. A simple solution to this is to continuously engage with your journalist contacts on social media. Now, I don't mean ferociously stalk every tweet and stuff their DMs with follow-ups to the 12 follow-ups you already sent to their email. I'm talking about engaging in real human interactions that provide value. Find an area of common interest and build a relationship from there. TweetDeck, for example, is a great tool for this and can help you to really find the right people that are involved in the conversations that interest you. Twitter is also a great place to find out about what a journalist likes, dislikes, their preferred method of contact, and a lot of other information that you can find in their bio.
The final solution is both relevant to publicists and journalists. And as we've mentioned, one of the biggest pain points that the journalists and reporters experience is a cluttered inbox. Some of them do have less of a volume to deal with, but others are waking up to over 100 to 200 to 300 emails in their inbox every day. Make sure that when you're pitching a journalist, that you provide a clear indication of what it is that you're pitching and why it's relevant. What we found is that bullet points are a great way to display this information. You also want to make sure when it comes to the subject line that you keep it very short and specific, because this allows the journalist a much easier way to identify if it's a fit or not. I spoke recently with Sean Captain and with Matt Hughes from the Next Web, and both of them had talked about canned responses as an option that they utilize for combating these cluttered inboxes that we've mentioned. Services like Google and LinkedIn also now provide canned responses and provide an easy way for journalists to kindly reply, no thanks or not interested. Yes, these can sometimes be vague, but the important thing to recognize is that you and your message have been acknowledged. A big no-no when it comes to these responses is asking for more clarification or why they weren't interested. Most often we've seen this leads to either landing you on the block list, and it can even land you being called out on Twitter, which you definitely don't want to have happen. And now that we've gone over some of these insights about journalists and the pain points and solutions, I'm going to transition this over to Kate, who's going to share more about the publicist side of things, what they're dealing with on a constant basis, along with some solutions they can implement to successfully reach their desired media contacts.
So we joke at the office that those of us in the PR department have the thickest skin, and that's simply because we hear the answer no so dang often. What they don't know is how freaking rewarding it is to hear an actual yes. We just devote so much time and energy to our outreach, praying for a response, and then when we get one, it is honestly one of the most fulfilling and exciting things about what I do personally. So the first pain point is receiving responses from pitches. And if you are a publicist or in PR, you really understand the struggle of actually getting a response. And as Jared mentioned, the ratio is 5-1, with far fewer writers compared to its sources. So since editors are in such high demand, it's critical that you differentiate yourself. And I don't just mean your client, I actually mean you personally. So figure out what makes you the best publicist to work with and what makes you really special. And we'll touch on this more when we chat through remedies to this pain point later on. The second pain point is time spent during the pitching process, and it's really about thinking and working smarter. Many clients just don't understand the incredible amount of work that goes into securing one piece of coverage. And we're talking about the ideation of the angle itself, the approval of the messaging, building of catered lists, pitching of the lists, and also the emails, the follow-ups, and then also the conversations and the interviews needing to be lined up to then actually make a piece of coverage go live. And oh yeah, and all of that is betting on the fact that the article won't be stripped from a senior manager. And we all know when that happens, it is the absolute worst. The third pain point is unrealistic client expectations. And I'm sure you've all felt that if you've worked with clients. And more often than not, you really do have to reset expectations with them. I can't tell you how many times a client has asked to be on a top tier publication and gave me a deadline of like a week. And the key to resetting these expectations is to share with them the in-depth process executed on in order to actually secure the coverage like I just walked through, and also outline the prospective value from the various tiers of these publications. For instance, don't hesitate to use GA or SEMrush and other tools at your hand to identify if your placements are driving traffic or revenue. So touching on some solutions for publicists. Point pitching is absolutely key. To break through the noise, it's super important that you take a step back and place yourself in the editor's shoes and ask yourself, does this email look like it's been sent to a few people? If the answer is yes, it's definitely not personalized enough. We pitch like 90%, we point pitch 90% of the time here at Power Digital. So that means we do a lot of research on the editor, and then we cater our emails specific to what we know that writer covers. And then I think most importantly too, we know what they're passionate about and pitch to their passions. For example, I've been reaching out to editors who are covering holiday gift guides, and I did some digging, and in a recent email that I sent back to an editor, I shared with her, thank you so much for the details, blah, blah, blah. Also, not to be a total weirdo, but I saw that you love Rydell wine glasses, and I couldn't agree more. They are the best, and I get one for my dad every year for Christmas. So this example leads me to my next solution. Build a bond first. Too often, publicists will actually go for the kill. And what I mean by that is they just ask them to take a look at a story or cover the content, or actually ask to just get front page mention. I've learned over the years that it is so important to first know who you're talking to extremely well, but also taking some time to introduce yourself and giving them a quick call and letting them know that you want to work together and why, and some of the similarities that you two share on a personal level. Not simply to help you reach your personal coverage goals for the client, but also to help the editor find the content and resources they need to really tell the stories that will propel them in their careers as well. The third solution is identifying the client goals and educating them. One of the best solutions to this in terms of resetting client expectations is to go back to the basics and ask them what their goals are. And oftentimes when you do this, they don't know. And if they do, they likely don't know what their PR or media relations specific goals are. And that is your opportunity to help them set their quarterly or annual goals. And you really should do this together. In this process, you can educate them on what's realistic and what is not. And it's also a time to do some research and identify what placements have actually made a difference for them in the past against their overarching goals. So an example of this is if your client is looking to grow its traffic in an effort to maybe ramp up their spend over the holidays to convert through direct response channels. I'd share with them that we target publications that are also highly trafficked, but maybe a bit broader in topic. And if the client is actually looking to convert and see a direct impact to their bottom line, I'd personally recommend we move forward with more niche blogs and trade pubs where the audience is more industry specific and actually ready to convert. So overall, it's just really important to use the tools that you have at hand and dive into GA and other platforms just to identify what has worked last year in terms of placements and set proper but also attainable goals with the client really right up front. So diving into some of our takeaways, personalize every pitch. Learning how to point pitch is one of the most important skill sets to have when aiming to be successful in media relations.
Secondary to that is to, again, do your homework. This should be the first rule of pitching. Find out who those ideal media contacts are and learn not only what they write about, but also what their publication focuses on. Michael Smart, a PR industry veteran, recommends the 80-20 rule, which means that you focus 80% of your time and efforts on the top 20% of your desired media contact list.
Don't send more than 2 follow-ups. It's really important not to be a nag, and ultimately it's about knowing who you're talking to. Oftentimes I'll gauge their interest, so I'll know if this pitch is even worth their time or even mine to follow up with. So for instance, I'll ask, like, do you think this product might be a fit for an upcoming story? Or have you ever needed resources like John Smith in the past?
Let's face it, technology and tools make our life easier. They save time, they provide resources and new opportunities, and they allow us to focus on the most important part of our job. At OnePitch, we have a saying that goes, make pitching the easiest part of your job. And by focusing on the time on crafting a compelling story with specific data points and supporting materials, you can increase your odds of reaching the right journalist for your client or brand.
Set expectations with the client and do this right away before the client gets a chance to really daydream and go extreme. Remember, it's all about looking at past data to help the client forecast appropriately. And that way you can create PR goals together and then ensure that you are completely aligned.
And last but not least, be patient. Yes, being patient can really pay off. Sometimes journalists are dealing with other stories, don't have the opportunity to write you back about your brand, or maybe just don't have the opportunity to reply to your morning or midday email. Other times they might be at a conference or on vacation. It's important to remind yourself that these folks are just like you and I, and also have a boss to answer to and deadlines to meet. Be patient, and you might just land that next feature story with your ideal media contact and outlet.
All right. Thank you to everybody who tuned in today to the webinar. We appreciate you listening to the insights that we were able to share with you. And we just want to let you know, if you have any questions, any comments, or any feedback, please feel free to reach Kate, myself, or Cassie at the addresses provided.